start my reading practice from the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Here I am. Hmm, 1 minute. I hit the turf with my heel first and peeling the muddy trail with the entire surface area of my foot increased my odds of slipping and falling. Carl didn't run like that. He moved like a goat, bouncing on his toes and running along the edges of the trail. As soon as his toes hit the ground, he fired his legs into the air. That's why he looked like he was floating. By design, he barely touched the ground while his head and core remained stable and engaged. From that moment onward, his movements were permanently etched in my brain like a cave painting. I visualized them all the time and put his technique into practice during training runs. They said they say it takes us 66 days to build a habit. For me, it takes a hell of a lot longer than that. But I eventually get there, and during all those years of ultra training and competition, I was working on my craft. A true runner analyzes their form. We did not learn how to do that in the SEALs, but being around so many ultra runners for years, I was able to absorb and practice skills that seemed unnatural at first. At Frozen Otter, my main focus was to hit the ground soft, to touch it just enough to explode. During my third birds class and then my first platoon, when I was considered one of the better runners. My head bounced all over the place. My weight was not balanced, and when my foot hit the ground, all my weight would be supported by that one leg, which led to some awkward falls on slippery terrain. Through trial and error and thousands of hours of training, I learned to maintain balance. At Frozen Otter, it all came together with speed and grace. I navigated steep, slippery trails. I kept my head flat and still my motion quiet as possible, and my steps silent by running on the front of my feet. When I picked up speed, it was as if I had disappeared into a white wind, elevated into a meditative state. I became Karl Meltzer. Now it was me who looked to be levitating over an impossible trail, and I finished the race in 16 hours, smashing the course record and winning the Frozen Otter title without losing any toys. 2 years earlier, I was stricken with dizzy spells during easy 6 mile runs. In 2013, I was forced to walk over 100 miles of bad water and finished in 17th place. I had been on a downslide and thought my days of contention for titles were long past over. After Frozen Otter, I was tempted to believe I would made it all the way back and then some, and that my best ultra years were actually ahead of me. I took that energy into my preparations for Badwater 2014. I was living in Chicago at that time, working as an instructor in Birds Prep, a school that prepared candidates to deal with the harsh reality they would face in birds. After more than 20 years, I was in my final year of military service, and by being placed in a position to drop wisdom on the would bees and wannabes, it felt like I had come full circle. As usual, I would run 10 miles to work and back and squeeze in another 8 miles during lunch when I could. On the weekends, I had do at least 135 to 40 mile run. It all added up to a succession of 130-mile weeks, and I was feeling strong. As spring bloomed, I added a heat training component by slipping on 4 or 5 layers of sweets, a beanie, and a Gore-Tex jacket before hitting the streets. When I had show up at work, my fellow SEAL instructors would watch amazed as I peeled off my wet clothes and stuffed them into black trash bags that together weighed nearly 15 pounds. I started my taper 4 weeks out and went from 130-mile weeks to an 80-mile weeks, then down to 60, 40, and 20. Tapering is supposed to generate an abundance of energy as you eat and rest, enabling the body to repair all the damage done and get you primed for competition. Instead, I had never felt worse. I was not hungry and could not sleep at all. Some people said my body was starved of calories, others suggested I might be low on sodium. My doctor measured my thyroid and it was a little off, but the readings were not so bad to explain how shitty I felt. Perhaps the explanation was simple that I was overtrained. 2 weeks before the race, I considered pulling out. I worried it was my heart again because on easy runs I felt a surge of adrenaline that I could not vent. Even a mellow pace sent my pulse racing into arrhythmia. 10 days before the race, I landed in Vegas. I had scheduled 5 runs but could not get past the 3-mile mark on any of them. I was not eating that much, but the weight kept piling on. It was all water. I sought out another doctor who confirmed there was nothing physically wrong with me, and when I heard that, I was not about to be a pussy. During the opening miles and initial climb of Badwater 2014, my heart rate ran high, but part of that was the altitude, and 22 miles later, I made it to the top in 6th or 7th place. Surprised and proud, I thought, let us see if I can go downhill. I have never enjoyed the brutality of running down a steep incline because it shreds the quads, but I also thought it would allow me to reset and calm my breath. My body refused. I could not catch my breath at all. I hit the flat section at the bottom, slowed my pace, and began to walk. My competitors passed me by as my thighs twitched uncontrollably. My muscle spasms were so bad, my quads looked like there was an alien wrestling around inside them. And I still did not stop. I walked for 4 full miles before seeking shelter in a lone pine motel room where the Badwater medical team had set up shop. They checked me out and saw that my blood pressure was a bit low but easily corrected. They couldn't find a single metric that could explain how fucked I felt. I ate some solid food, rested, and decided to try one more time. There was a flat section leaving Lone Pine, and I thought if I could knock that out, perhaps I would catch a second wind. But 6 or 7 miles later, my cells were still empty, and I had given all I had. My muscles trembled and twitched. My heart jumped up and down the chart. I looked over at my pacer and said, "That's it, man, I am done." My support vehicle pulled up behind us and I climbed inside. A few minutes later, I was laying on that same motel bed with my tail between my legs. I had lasted just 50 miles, but any humiliation that came with quitting, not something I was used to, was drowned out by an instinct that something was way the fuck off. It was not my fear talking or my desire for comfort. This time I was certain that if I did not stop trying to break through this barrier, I would not make it out of the series alive. We left Lone Pine for Las Vegas the next night, and for 2 days I did my best to rest and recover, hoping my body would settle somewhere close to equilibrium. We were staying at the Wynn, and on that third morning I went for a jog to see if I had anything in the tank. 1 mile later, my heart was in my throat, and I shut it down. I walked back to the hotel, knowing that despite what the doctor said, I was sick and suspected that whatever I had was serious. Later that night, after seeing a movie in the Vegas suburbs, I felt weak as we strolled to a nearby restaurant, the Elephant Bar. My mom was a few paces ahead and I saw her in triplicate. I clenched my eyes shut, released them, and there were still three of her. She held the door open for me, and when I stepped into the cool confines, I felt a bit better. We slid into a booth opposite one another. I was too unsteady to read the menu and asked her to order for me. From there it got worse, and when the runner showed up with our food, my vision blurred again. I strained to open my eyes wide and felt woozy as my mother looked to be floating above the table. You are going to have to call an ambulance, I said, because I am going down. Desperate for some stability, I laid my head on the table, but my mom didn't dial 911. She crossed to my side, and I leaned on her as we made our way to the hostess stand and then back to the car. On the way, I shared as much of my medical history as I could recall in short bursts in case I lost consciousness and she did have to call for help. Luckily, my vision and energy improved enough for her to drive me to the emergency room herself. My thyroid had been flagged in the past, so that's the first thing the doctors explored. Many Navy SEALs have thyroid issues when they reach their 30s because when you put motherfuckers in extreme environments like Hell Week and war, their hormones levels go haywire. When the thyroid gland is suboptimal, fatigue, muscle aches, and weakness are among more than a dozen major side effects. But my thyroid level were close to normal. My heart checked out too. The ER docs in Vegas told me all I needed was rest. I went back to Chicago and saw my own doctor who ordered a battery of blood tests. His office tested my endocrine system and screened me for Lyme, hepatitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and a handful of other autoimmune diseases. Everything came back clean except for my thyroid, which was slightly suboptimal. But that didn't explain how I had morphed so fast from an elite athlete capable of running hundreds of miles into a pretender who could barely muster the energy to tie his shoes, let alone run a mile without verging on collapse. I was in medical no man's land. I left his office with more questions than answers and a prescription for thyroid medication. Each day that went by, I felt worse. Everything was crashing on me. I had trouble getting out of bed. I was constipated and itchy. They took more blood and decided I had Addison's disease, an autoimmune illness that occurs when your adrenals are drained and your body does not produce enough cortisol, which was common in SEALs because we are primed to run on adrenaline. My doctor prescribed the steroid hydrocortisone, DHEA, and Arimidex among other meds, but taking his pills only accelerated my decline, and after that, he and the other doctors I saw were tapped out. The look in their eyes said it all. In their minds, I was either a crazy hypochondriac or I was dying, and they didn't know what was killing me or how to heal me. I fought through it the best I could. My coworkers did not know anything about my decline because I contributed to show no weakness. My whole life I had been hiding all my insecurities and trauma. I kept all my vulnerabilities locked down beneath an iron veneer, and eventually the pain became so bad I couldn't even get out of bed. I called in sick and lay there, staring at the ceiling and wondered, could this be the end? Peering into the abyss sent my mind reeling back through the days, weeks, years. Like fingers flipping through old files, I found all the best parts and tacked them together into a highlight loop, streamed on repeat. I grew up beat down and abused, filtered, uneducated through a system that rejected me at every turn until took ownership and started to change. Since then, I had been obese. I was married and divorced. I had two heart surgeries, taught myself to swim, and learned to run on broken legs. I was terrified of heights, then took up high altitude skydiving. Water scared the living shit out of me, yet I became a technical diver and underwater navigator. which is several degrees of difficulty beyond scuba diving. I completed in more than 60 ultra distance races, winning several and set a pull-up record. I stuttered through my early years in primary school and grew up to become the Navy SEAL's most trusted public speaker. I had served my country on the battlefield. Along the way, I became driven to make sure that I could not be defined by the abuse I was born into or the bullying that I grew up with. I wouldn't be defined by talent either. I did not have much or my own fears and weaknesses. Thank you. That's it for the day.